Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the Mixed Martial Pod. We're here today in 2024 for episode 10. It is awesome to be here. I'm very, very happy with myself as well as just the progression of this channel to see that we've gotten 10 episodes in. I remember hearing a statistic that's something like a podcast usually fails within their first 3 months, which would be equivalent to about 12 weeks. We're getting pretty close to getting past that 12-week mark. I could be talking complete shit. That might not be the way that the statistic works, but regardless, I'm happy to be as far as I am with this, and I will continue to do so. I think it's good to be consistent with it. But today we're going to jump straight into it, as we always do on this show, and we are going to start with a lot of announcements. We've got some cool stuff to talk about with the recent event that we have just had last week as the first event of the year, but I want to talk about, there's been a lot of announcements. So first of all, just one thing to note for UFC 299, and then we'll move on to UFC 300. Poirier versus Benoit Saint-Denis. Dude, I have been saying, not for a long time, I won't claim that it's been a long time, it's been a fairly recent thing, especially only since my first video on Benoit was at UFC 295, but ever since I saw that UFC Paris fight with him versus Thiago Moises, and I decided to go back and do a bit of research and watch the rest of his fights, dude, this guy is a killer. I think Benoit has the chance to be the champion. I think he is one of the most dangerous lightweights on the UFC's roster right now. Poirier is a crazy fucking matchup for him. I did not think that he would get such a high profile fight. I thought that after getting Frivola, who was ranked 12 or something, or 13, Benoit got put into rank 11. I think he's now been dropped down to 12 as time has progressed. But he's getting put with number 3, Dustin Poirier, over a 5-round fight co-main event. Holy fucking shit, am I excited for that. I think I've been saying on Instagram that there is not a single fight announced right now, maybe one more that I'm going to mention just after this, that I'm as excited for as Poirier versus Benoit. Poirier is obviously coming off a knockout loss, so he is in a bit of a precarious situation. He's going to get a lot of people saying that this could be the end for him. It may be, it may not be. Benoit is coming off of a knockout win. Both head kicks, coincidentally, but I don't think that's really going to make much of a difference. Just something funny to note. But Benoit is such a killer, dude. Every single one of his fights, he is so scrappy. He's so tough. And his UFC debut especially is such a good one to watch. If you have not watched it, please go back and watch Benoit Saint-Denis versus, I think his name is Aleksandar. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that, but it's Aleksandar Zaleski dos Santos. Please, if you have not watched it already, go back and watch Benoit Saint-Denis versus Aleksandar dos Santos. Zaleski dos Santos. It's a long name, is a mouthful. But it was upper weight class, it was at welterweight, and it was a 3-round fight. It went the full 3 rounds. Benoit got the absolute fucking shit beaten out of him, and it is his only loss, his first loss in his career, and his only loss was that fight. Watch it. You will know what I mean. Dude took punch after punch after punch. He got fucking battered, but somehow still managed to hurt dos Santos constantly throughout the fight. And the referee honestly could have stopped that fight so many times, but Benoit got lucky enough that the referee didn't stop it, even though it put his health at risk. But he managed to just fucking tank it out. Bro has the most iron chin I've seen in the lightweight division currently. I could be forgetting someone, but he just takes punches and punches in bunches, dude. Like, it is crazy. He's my favorite fighter at the moment, I think. I wouldn't say of all time, but right now he's currently holding a pretty fucking special place in my heart because of how quickly he's risen to fame, how much of a fucking dog he is, and how much of a dog fight he always makes it. And bro had his debut in MMA in 2019. He's only been fighting for 4 years, and he's 13-1, and he's fighting number 3 ranked Dustin Poirier. Holy fucking shit. That's one to look out for. The only other fight, like I just mentioned, that I am thinking could be another one of my favorite fights that's been announced recently that I'm most excited for is the next thing, UFC 300. That's what we're going to be talking about. That fight is Arman Tsarukyan versus Charles Oliveira. Now, I've mentioned here, Dana has confirmed it's a number 1 contender fight because supposedly Islam's injured. Islam, however, is on Twitter saying he wants to fight Gaethje while he waits for Arman versus Oliveira, but the entire reason that Oliveira and Arman are fighting is because Islam is injured, and he's not available for a title fight. So I don't know, man. But I think, honestly, Arman has a lot to gain. Charles has a lot to lose. This is the same thing we had in the Dariush fight, kind of. Except Dariush was still had a fair bit to lose with his win streak. Arman's only on like a 5-fight win streak, but he's only lost to 2 people. One of them was Islam Makhachev. The other was Mateusz Gamera in a really close decision that was a short fight where they kind of did a lot of grappling, and people tend to say that he didn't really lose the fight. And even if you want to say he lost the fight, it's like he didn't take damage, he didn't get dominated. It was just a technical battle for 15 minutes that he may have lost. But everyone else, Arman has fucking demolished, and badly too. Not like just a little bit. Like, Arman's that guy. So I'm super excited for that one. That is... no, it's not co-main event. Of course it's not co-main event for UFC 300. There's going to be like 3-4 title fights, but it's main card for UFC 300. Also on the main card, I would assume it could be prelims, but that'd be pretty disrespectful if you ask me, is Aljamain Sterling versus Calvin Kattar. Interesting to see that Aljo is moving up, and he did mention recently that this is a permanent move. So he won't be going back to bantamweight, unless maybe, if he was to become champion at 45 pounds and reign, and like say Sugar was still champion or something like that, or somebody he had beaten at 135 was champion, maybe they'd be able to build a double champ fight, but that's something that would happen in a long time, in a few years. But he has said that this is a permanent move to featherweight. He wants to stay in this division, and I think he absolutely has the ability to, because Aljo was big for 35, first of all, and second of all, he was the champion, and arguably, from a lot of people's point of view, one of the most dominant champions bantamweight's had for a while. So I think he will have success at 145. The only thing that I would note is there is a couple of fighters that I think could cause him issues, but at the same time, it's like, no shit. They're at the top of the division. So Yair, Ortega, Holloway, Volk, and Topuria. I'm pretty sure that is the top 5. But you understand why I would say that, because Ortega has the grappling to match Aljo, so he could pose a bit of a threat by not letting Aljo backpack, or maybe making it difficult for Aljo to backpack and not actually giving him that one up that he usually has over his opponents. 2 would be Yair, because Yair is a crazy good kickboxer that also has great defensive grappling as well as offensive grappling, like we saw in the Josh Emmett fight. He gets submissions off his back, among other things. So Aljo would have to look out for that, and that would again kind of put a bit of a questionability on how good Aljo's grappling would be of a deterrent to keep the fight on the feet. And if against Yair, I don't even know if you want to keep the fight on the feet, dude. Yair is such a good fucking kickboxer. Obviously, Holloway is just fucking hard to beat, man. So if anyone's going to beat him, that's going to be impressive. So obviously I'm going to say that that's a hard matchup for him. Volkanovski's the champion, and Aljo said that he didn't want to fight Volkanovski. Oh, actually, no, he wanted to fight Volkanovski, sorry. It was O'Malley that said he didn't want to fight Volkanovski. But after losing to O'Malley, Aljo said he's not sure that he would. He said, if O'Malley can do that to me, I don't want to know what Volkanovski could do to me. So granted, he's in the division now, so he might face him one day, but I think that Volk is a scary matchup for anyone. It doesn't matter who it is. And Topuria is just that dark horse, dude. We don't know. We could find out in 2 months that Topuria is champion, and he might become champion and beat Volk in a rematch and then dominate as champion. And then even if Aljo was to rise through featherweight division, he's going to have to fight Topuria. So I think that's also a tough one. Like I said, the same thing with being a very good grappler as well as on the feet. Featherweight's becoming a pretty good division in terms of having a lot of like very well-rounded guys at the top there, like your Topuria, Volkanovski, Yair. I want to say Ortega, but Ortega's not the greatest striker, but you understand where I'm coming from. Next up, we have UFC 300 continuing on. Jiri versus Rakic. That's a fun one, light heavyweight. So I think the winner of this fight and the winner of Ankalaev versus Walker, yeah, they're the 2 guys that are probably going to be in the talks for light heavyweight title fights. Obviously, we saw Ankalaev beat Walker just this past weekend, so that is a definitive answer as to who would be in the title conversation for between those 2. And I think Ankalaev was an easier sell compared to Johnny Walker. Johnny would have had a lot more trouble putting himself in the conversation, especially with things like the loss to Jamal Hill, because he just doesn't have the statement power that Ankalaev has, with Ankalaev being on such a good streak, hasn't lost to anyone, except for Paul Craig, which was a long time ago, and Paul Craig's pretty, no offense, washed up now. And he just had a title fight that people would argue he won and went to a draw. So he's pretty heavily contentious. He's in pretty heavy contention for the title shot. So I think it will be between Jamal Hill and Ankalaev for who gets the next shot. But I think UFC 300, Jiri versus Rakic, the winner of that will be very much looking to be next in line for one of the next 2 or 3 guys to be spoken about in the conversation for the title fight. Up next, Garbrandt versus Figueiredo. That's a fun one, and it's going to be at 135 pounds, obviously, because Figgy has moved up a division now. I'm excited. I think Garbrandt has had a little bit more success recently. I think a lot of people are enjoying seeing that. And he's getting a ranked fight because Figgy fought Rob Font, UFC Austin, I believe, December. And he's now ranked something like 6, 7, or 8 around that area. So Garbrandt could be back in the rankings with this fight if he wins. And that could be very interesting to see, to be honest. And he's not that old. I'm pretty sure Garbrandt's only like 33 or something like that. So he's definitely not too old to be having a second run. It just is a shame that he did have the downfall he did. So it will be interesting to see whether he's able to return from such an egregious fall from grace. Up next, Jim Miller. It is not official who he's fighting, but it is essentially 100% confirmed that he will fight UFC 300. We were waiting to see if he won at this most recent card, Ankalaev versus Walker, his matchup with, I forget the guy's name, but it's Benitez is his last name, and he beat the guy. He submitted him in round 3. So he called out Matt Brown and Paul Felder at the end. So either one of those two is a good matchup for him, and we could see that at UFC 300. Pretty historic fight, being that Jim Miller's been at UFC 100, 200, and 300 now. Will be awesome to see. I think Felder's my favorite one, but I can see why people want Matt Brown, especially. I believe they said Jim Miller has more finishes at the most finishes, at 155, or most knockouts at 155 pounds, and Matt Brown has the most knockouts at 170 pounds. So that's a pretty cool matchup, to be honest. But I prefer the Felder fight because I want to see Felder come back, and I think that that's a cool storyline to see someone as good as Felder. And by the way, Matt Brown, being as good as he is no longer a ranked fighter, has been pretty, here and there with losing to fighters, the same as Jim Miller has been in the last few years. However, Jim's had a pretty good run recently, being 5-1 in his last 6. The last time he was anything close to that, I believe it was when he first got into the UFC in like 2012. He was on like a 6-7 fight win streak, something like that. And since then, he hasn't gotten more than 3 fights in a row until now. So pretty cool to see. Granted, he's only on a 2 fight win streak right now, but he was on a 3 fight win streak, lost 1, and then has won 2 more now. So pretty good still, regardless. So I think either one of those will be fun, and I'd love to see it. Right, so as I was mentioning before, the main event for UFC 300 is not announced, nor is the co-main event, because we know that Zhang Weili versus, I don't know how to pronounce her first name, but her last name is Yan. It's not the main or co-main event. It's confirmed to be on the card, and the fight is made, but it is not the main or co-main event. Those will probably go to male title fights. The only way I could see that not being the case is if Alexa Grasso was to be announced. My Alexa is listening to me. Alexa, shut up. If Grasso was to be announced to have a fight, however, I think with the Shevchenko rematch kind of being the only correct. I mean, to be fair, they could do the Shevchenko trilogy at the UFC 300. I haven't thought of that, but there's been no word of it. And there was meant to be Zhang Weili versus Grasso, so I can't say her name, as a bit of a super fight for Zhang Weili to become double champion, but evidently that fight didn't get made. So Weili's just having another title defense, and Grasso could be on the card, but I believe it will be 2 title fights from male divisions. Sadly, I think we are going to get Leon versus Bilal as one of those fights, which sucks because it's a terrible fight. It's a terrible matchup. Leon is not bad. Leon is a slow fighter that can be boring at times, but I have the utmost respect for him, and I think a lot of people do. And he's had interesting fights before. It's not like he's a boring fighter. However, Bilal is a fucking boring ass fighter. Like, I'm not going to act like I hate Bilal and think he's a terrible person, because that's not true. But His fights are not interesting to watch. He has a terrible finish rate. He has never gotten a knockdown in the UFC. Come on, man. Like, it's just, that's not a good fight. If you're going to make the fight, I understand. Belal has 100% earned a title shot, I think, as much as it kind of doesn't really make the most sense to me. He did technically beat Gilbert Burns, who was like number 4 ranked or something like that in his last fight. So if you beat a number 4 rank in your last fight and that brings your win streak up to like 10 fights in a row, granted we're going to ignore the no contest in between there, I think you kind of need to get given a title fight. But I just don't think that they should have put it on 300. It doesn't make any sense, because Leon has confirmed he's going to fight on UFC 300. It's not been confirmed that it's Belal, but who the fuck else is going to fight? There's no way that they're going to give Shavkat the fight. They could. I'd actually fucking love it. Honestly, I'd love if they just gave Shavkat the fight instead of Belal. And then Belal could totally be next. I just don't think it's a UFC 300 fight. I know it's not, actually. It's not a UFC 300 fight. Leon versus Belal is not. It's a sleeper. That's definitely, like, not a sleeper in a good way. Like, a sleepy fight that's going to put me to sleep. I'd watch that to go to bed. But Pereira will likely be the main event of the UFC 300. UFC 300. Like I mentioned, it's going to be between 2 people. Ankalaev just won, so he is now back in the contention spot for one of the next title shots, and Jamal Hill is returning from his injury. However, we don't know if Jamal is ready yet. We also don't know if the UFC wants to make the Ankalaev fight yet, or if they want to keep Ankalaev for after Jamal has returned. However, it's kind of really, there's not really any real way to tell, especially with the fact that Ankalaev just won this fight this past weekend. So if they're going to make any fights like that, it will take a couple of weeks to make. But Pereira says he wants to fight on 300. He is also the only male champion available to fight on UFC 300 aside from Leon and Pantoja. Leon, who I mentioned, is already said that he's going to be fighting on it. Welterweight will be below light heavyweight in terms of stacks for what fight is top of the bill. And for Pantoja, I don't think there's any interesting matchups for Pantoja yet. Moreno and Royval are fighting very soon, and I'm sure there will be other flyweight title contention fights coming up in the future. But with Moreno and Royval's fight being in like February, I think they probably won't want to turn around for UFC 300. I also don't think that they would want to leave the possibility of an injury occurring that late, so that to the fact where UFC 300 wouldn't have a confirmed fight 2 months before it was about to happen. And aside from those two, Moreno and Royval, there's no one for Pantoja to fight yet. There isn't. There's no guy sitting at the top of the division that we should be like, oh, this guy's the clear title. No, especially because Figueiredo has left the division now. I just don't think that's the case. So I don't think we will see Pantoja, at least not on UFC 300. So I think that's it for UFC 300. We haven't had any more announcements, obviously, but I think that's all I have to say about it. Just a couple more things that I would like to talk about before I close out the episode. Obviously, I mentioned we have Moreno versus Royval 2. The reason for that is because the fight between Moreno and Albazi was called off because Albazi got an injury. And I've written some notes here, and I said, quote, word for word, honestly, thank God, because Albazi did not deserve that fight. He should never have been given that fight. He should never have been given the victory over Kai Kara France because he got battered in that fight. And then the UFC should never have looked at a fight where a fighter got given a bad decision and was arguably robbed, or was arguably given a robbery. They should never look at a matchup like that and decide, yeah, number 1 contender match next. That makes no sense. When a fighter gets a pretty bad decision given to them, usually, even if the UFC doesn't outwardly say it, they should know that that's a bad time to give them a fight where usually if you beat Kai Kara France, that would put you in a title contention number 1 contender spot, because he's ranked like number 3 now, Albazi is. But because of how bad that fucking fight was, they should have known that they need to give Albazi another fight to give him the chance to make a better statement, because he's not a shit fighter. He's a good fighter. He's one of the best flyweights in the world. That's why he's in the top 15. But he's not better than Kai Kara France. So it doesn't make much sense to put him in title contentions and not Kai Kara France, who is meant to be fighting Manel Cap, who is not bad at it either, but ranked much lower. So, like I said, honestly, thank God that they took that fight off, because Albazi doesn't deserve it. Give him someone else. He's injured for now, so he'll be out for a few months. Give him someone else. Give him like Manel Cap and Mateus Nicolau was meant to happen this weekend. He got called off. Give him one of those guys. So give us Albazi versus Nicolau, or give us Albazi versus Cap. Either one of those is a fine matchup, honestly. last couple of things. We've had Vettori versus Allen has been announced for a Fight Night main event. Marvin Vettori versus Brendan Allen, so that's a nice one. That's like Brendan's ranked number 5th, I believe, in middleweight, and I think Allen is 7 or 8. So that's a nice one. That'll be probably title fight adjacent. I'd say those guys, the winner of that probably will get a top 5 fight next, because they'll be in the top 5, and that will probably be a number 1 contenders fight, or at least a fight that gives them the opportunity to make a statement to lay claim to number 1 contender. Also, UFC Atlantic City. UFC Atlantic City is coming up. I believe that's March 30th. Yeah, I think it's the card right before. Oh no, it's 2 weeks before UFC 300, and we have been confirmed that the main event for that is Sean Brady versus Vincent and Luque. So that's nice because Luque got his fight cancelled with Gary recently, and Sean Brady just won over Kelvin Gastelum, so that's a good victory, and it's awesome to see. He's going to be climbing back up the rankings, and I believe it's co-main event. It should be, because it's a high-ranking fight. Erin Blanchfield versus Manon Fiorot. I don't know how you pronounce her last name. That's also going to be a number 1 contender fight, I would say. So the winner of that Blanchfield versus Fiorot should probably face whoever is the flyweight women's champion after the next flyweight fight. I'd say Shevchenko-Grasso is the next fight to make, and then the winner of Blanchfield-Fiorot will probably face the winner of Shevchenko-Grasso, because at that point it's the trilogy, and there's been no gaps in between. There's been no separate title fights from Grasso or Shevchenko. They've fought back to back to back, so it'll be definitely necessary. Regardless of any controversy that might lay there, they will need to give a different contender a chance. So that is all I have to say to you guys, I believe. The only other things I have is Ngannou versus Joshua has been announced, so that one's cool. Nice to see Ngannou continuing. He had this fight booked on the same day as UFC 299, which would have been a huge mistake, but they did move it to the day before, which is a very smart move, because they would have got nobody watching if they had it on the same day as UFC 299. However, I do still think they might struggle with pay-per-view buys, because people aren't going to want to spend... it's in Australian dollars, it's 60. In American dollars, I'd imagine it's like $45. They're not going to want to spend $45 twice in a row, back to back on 2 pay-per-views. I just don't see it happening. So I think Ngannou's going to suffer in sales on that fight, but I doubt he cares, because most of the payment that he gets isn't coming from pay-per-view sales. It's coming from Saudi money that they're paying just to put the event on, because they want that stuff to happen in Riyadh. So fair enough. And also, McGregor announced his fight with Chandler on June 29th, International Fight Week. It has only been announced by Conor. There's been no confirmation by the UFC, and Chandler says he does not have a contract yet, so there is no official confirmation. But Conor seems pretty confident in what he's saying about that one. This is a lot more convincing than when he said that he'd be at UFC 296, because that was only ever being spoken about. The UFC did talk about that, but had always been saying we're looking to do it, not that it's been booked or it's even that it's the plan. So that is all I have to talk to you guys about. Thank you very much for joining me today on the Mixed Martial Pod episode 10. It has been a blast. I will see you guys all in the next episode. We have some awesome stuff coming up. UFC 297 will have definitely passed. That is in just a few days, so we'll have that to talk about. It is possible that this one would not come out until after UFC 298, but I think it'll probably be within a week or two before that that I'll get another one of these episodes out, and we'll have some stuff to talk about. So I'm very excited to see how the future of the UFC pans out throughout the beginning of 2024. So far it has been good. We have some awesome matchups, and it is looking like a bright future for the UFC. So thank you guys for watching. Be sure to leave a like, subscribe, comment, let me know what you thought, if there's any other things you want me to cover in future episodes of the podcast. And yeah, I'll see you guys all in the next episode.